Hello, and welcome to another video of me talking at the camera. This is a little new for me, and anybody that watched my last video, you might notice that I cleaned up my drafting table behind me a little bit. This really isn't the best backdrop for videos. I think this is a little bit better. I've got Ranger X playing on my Genesis in the background there. It's kind of a cool game. To my regular audience, one, I guess I hope you are okay with this. Two, I did play a whole bunch of Megami Tengoku 2 for the PCFX. Recently, I'm still on a PCFX kick, and it's a hysterical, really wacky, funny, crazy Japanese game that I think it is turning out to be like a shining star on the PCFX. So really looking forward to doing a review on that. But today I want to respond to Dan from Dan's Game Corner. Again, his response to like 10 gaming firsts that were originally posted by Lawn Boys Post 1975. I kind of want to respond to Dan because I like his videos and he's a really cool guy. And two, I'd like to share a little bit more with people about like my history of video gaming, just because I think that's fun. I think everybody has a different sort of experience that they had growing up, if they're a gamer now or were a gamer then. And I think it's fun to kind of share those stories. The questions were first game played, and this one I really distinctly remember. I was probably like 4 years old, 5 years old, right in that area, and our neighbors had an Atari 2600. I think we had just moved in the neighborhood, and we went over there with my folks, and so I sat in my dad's lap, and he actually like ran the joystick, and I just pushed the shoot button on the controller. But it was amazing. I mean, it was like, looking at the video on the screen, and what I was doing was having an effect on this thing. It was shooting out lasers at these asteroids coming at it, and it was really exciting for me. So that actually, in addition to being my first video gaming experience, it was also the first sequential story, visual story that I wrote. I did a series of pictures that sort of was, telling the sequence of asteroids coming at a little triangle thing that was shooting them. It really captured my imagination. First game bought. And this one, I think it was framed, the first game purchased with your own money. This is really foggy for me. Somehow, that didn't really stick in my head for me, or, I remember choosing games. I may have purchased a game with my own money. I won't speculate on it. So I'm going to change this a little bit to what was the first game that I imported from Japan. So this is going to be a Ranma 1/2 game for the Super Famicom or the Super Nintendo in the US. And I got a Super Nintendo quite late. It wasn't really a collection thing at the time for me, I don't think, but it was more of a purchasing the last gen of hardware. So it was probably in 1995-ish, 96, somewhere around in there. And so I got this Ranma 1/2 game for it, and surprisingly, several of the games were released here. We got Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle, which I believe was like the second in this 2D fighting series of Ranma 1/2 games. If you don't know, Ranma 1/2 it's an anime, and I was introduced to this around 1994-95, and I thought it was really neat, and I wanted to play video games of it. 2D fighters were pretty big at the time, and I think at this point I'm just not competitive. It's matured as a genre, and I think it's gotten really hardcore. But man, back then, anything that looked like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter 2, this was a Street Fighter 2 style, and that was huge at the time, and I loved it. I thought that was really neat. So so I imported this, and I mean, importing it was cool too, because the U.S. hardware would play the games, but the region lockout on it was a physical, like, way that the plastic of the system was built, so that you just couldn't physically put the cartridge into the U.S. system, but the hardware was the same. It would play it. So I ended up having to order a screwdriver, like, that would take like a security bit, which was like completely specific to the Super Nintendo, or in this case the Super Famicom screws that were in this thing. So so I ended up ordering this, thanks to the internet and a catalog, and I ordered this this bit, and I was able to unscrew the case and take the board out and actually just plug the bare board into the Super Nintendo to play this game, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I really enjoyed the game. In fact, I made a website for it, which is still up today. The next question is the first game traded. So again, I think I may modify this one a little bit, because, and I don't know that I really traded a game, like, permanently with any of my friends. I certainly had friends who gamed, and we, had games that we played at each other's houses and things like that, and we may have even let somebody borrow a game, but I just don't remember trading a game, like doing a swap. So instead I'm going to talk about the first game that I picked out myself. This just sticks in my head because it was also for a game system that I did not own. So my brother had an NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, and we went to the mall, and so we, parents were like, hey, both of you pick out a Nintendo game, and we'll get you whatever you want. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So so I went ahead and picked out Super Mario Bros. 3, and my brother picked out Final Fantasy. So we got Super Mario Bros. 3 and Final Fantasy. So two awesome games for the NES. It was interesting because it was my brother's system, and he would let me play it all the time. We'd play it together, and I'd spend hours on it by myself, and he'd play it all the time. So we really shared it and got a lot of enjoyment from it. I was always an Atari gamer and then a Sega gamer, so kind of the same as Dan. There was a little bit of system envy, which I had, and not only that, but there was like selection envy. Once we did this choosing these two particular games, because Super Mario 3 was pretty neat, and I think I originally picked it because I missed out on that whole Super Mario Brothers thing. I mean, I played some of it after the fact, but everybody else was like Super Mario Brothers, and I'm just like, I never really played it that much, so I wanted to play the new one. And but Final Fantasy was awesome, and I'm just like, wow, I wish I'd picked Final Fantasy out, I mean, we had the game, and I could play the whole thing, so it didn't really matter who picked it out, but it was just kind of like, I thought he actually made the better choice. First system owned is the Atari 7800. Really cool system, just sort of a band-aid that to try to compete with the NES, which really took off. And for me, though, it was cool because I had started gaming on an Atari, and this was compatible with all of the old Atari 2600 games, which the 5200, I believe it was not. So Atari was sort of playing catch-up with that, trying to recover from that, and so it had a huge library of games, in addition to the ones made specifically for the 7800. And in my last video, I also said that the 7800 games weren't all that good, so I guess in defense, it's not like going back and playing Atari 2800 games. There's some fun games. There's your typical arcade ports, really good arcade ports of, like, Galaga and Dig Dug and Food Fight was actually one that's almost, I think, kind of unique to the 7800, which actually is a really fun, just arcade title. So first game peripheral is the next question, and this one's a little hard to remember. I think I would say the first peripheral I got was probably a gamepad for the Genesis. So this Tengen pad, which had the A, B, and C buttons, and it also had turbo buttons for each one of those, so you could do better at the games. Required you to hit the button a lot to shoot or slash a sword or whatever you needed to do. So that was a pretty cool thing. Maybe a better story, though, is actually the Activator. I really, really wanted for the Genesis, and I think the reason for that was, again, we're going back to these 2D fighting games back in the day. I loved them, I guess. And the Genesis, of course, had like Mortal Kombat, which was the coolest thing. I mean, it had the Super Nintendo had it, but the Genesis had the one with blood in it, so that was amazing when you're 14 years old. And so there was that, and then Eternal Champions, I think, which is not a very good 2D fighter, but I'm pretty sure that's the game that I had at the time that I really wanted to play with the Activator, if I'm getting the name right. And it's so it was this like hexagonal ring that you put on the floor, and you'd stand inside of it, and then it would register like you punch or kick or something, and it registers it in the air. And translates it into the game. So you kind of like the peripherals that we have now, the Move and the just the Wii system and the Microsoft Kinect. It was that era's version of that, and I got it. It was really cool. My dad and his wife, we went to the mall, and they got it for me, and it was really neat. And when I got home, and come to find out, like, the parameters under which this thing worked were so specific. Like, you had to have ceilings that were at least 8 feet tall, and they needed to be like reflective, so it was like shooting, I don't know if it was infrared or what, but it was bouncing something off of the ceiling, really, so that it could register when that signal was interrupted. And where I would play it, it just wouldn't work. And so that maybe that experience has soured me on the current generation of jump around like a fool video game peripherals, but I never really got to use that, so that was a disappointing childhood gaming experience. The next question is first magazine. Definitely for me that was video games and computer entertainment. I have very fond memories of that, and I don't know how many issues of that I had, but video games and computer entertainment, it was really neat because it covered not just one console or something, but it covered console gaming. So there would be stuff in there about the Genesis that I had, or the Sega CD after a while, or that kind of thing, which was neat. But it also would cover the other systems, so I could kind of keep up with what was happening on those, and it would also cover computer systems. So one of the things I remember distinctly was the Amiga. They would always cover games in there from like Psygnosis and the people that did all those Amiga games, and they just looked really neat. They looked super cool, and I wanted a Commodore 64 back in the day, and I thought the Amiga was cool, and so I didn't get to play that ever, but I just got to read about the games and video games and computer entertainment. First game system bought with own money. So this one gets two answers. Probably the first one I bought with my own money was a top-loading NES. I mean, you just sort of go back and you didn't have a lot of money, and they had it relatively affordably. I think I probably got it for $50. But the one that it was more of the first system I purchased that was a contemporary system was the Sega Saturn. And I was really excited about that. I was a Sega gamer after Atari, so it was just really neat to be able to get the Saturn myself. And of course, the game that I got with it was Dragon Force, and so that was awesome. That was a really fun game, a strategy game where the strategy was kind of light, but it had to do with sort of like playing Risk or something like that. You had a big map, and you had to sort of take over different locations and just sort of spread out and dominate the the entire map. But you did this by recruiting troops from various towns, and you had these generals that would command the armies, and so they would recruit different kinds of people, and so they would have their own special kind of troops. So you might have like one guy has, recruits, just gets cavalry, and one guy, ends up with a bunch of martial art monks or something like that. And then you have this kind of rock, paper, scissors thing, only it was with, I guess, a vaster array of character types, but some types would be stronger against others, and it was just an amazing game. So, first handheld system. So I'm going to change this question a little bit too, because I've never been much of a handheld gamer. I got a Game Gear. That was technically my first handheld system, but that was really just a collector thing. Again, it was cheap. I got it cheap when, Kmart or one of those department stores got like some old stock of them and were selling them again for a little while, way after it was anything contemporary. So what I'm going to change this to is, what is the first Japanese system that I owned, and that is the PCFX. And I purchased this actually in Japan. I don't know if it was the first time. No, it definitely wasn't the first time I went. It was the second time I went. But I got it at a used game store in Akihabara, and like chucked it in my luggage. It was in like the original box, and it got chucked on the conveyor belt and went through all that stuff. But it came through unscathed, and I still own it to this day. I actually pulled the box out the other day, and it had like the sticker on it that said how much it cost in Japanese yen and stuff. I think it was like about $50 worth at the time. It wasn't too expensive. This is sort of the infamous PCFX, and you know that I've done tons of PCFX review videos, and I'm not going to stop because it's just fun and nostalgic. I just really remember that system from playing it back in the day. And my first Japanese system, first CD-based system played, the Sega CD. Just awesome memories of that. That was one of those ones where my folks got it for me. I had the Genesis, and then I was able to get the CD add-on for it, and it was like new and expensive and amazing, and I was just like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And I really liked my Sega CD. It got to play a lot of cool games on it. Lunar, the Silver Star Story, Popful Mail, what else? Time Gal. Some of those FMV videos, video games. Time Gal's one of them. Sewer Shark and that kind of stuff. Just had a lot of fun on that system. First system sold is ironically going to be that very same Sega CD. And I guess my first answer to that question is what? Because I've never sold another game system. I get game systems and I keep them. I have my original 7800. I have the original Saturn that I purchased myself. I have my first PlayStation. I have all that stuff. But what I did was I got the second generation Genesis and the second generation Sega CD used years later, and so I had the first gen and the second gen. And I think some people are gonna probably want to crucify me for this, because I'm getting kind of a whiff on the internet of sentiments of the sound processing on the second gen Genesis not being as good as the first and stuff like that. But really, just for me, I got into the mindset that when the systems are retooled and redone, you end up with a better system. In addition to it probably being cheaper and stuff like that, is it's also just sort of more well built. So I was looking at that and going, well, this is smaller. The whole unit of it all together, it's longer, but they're not stacked on top of each other. But something about just having that I liked. And I felt like the old system and the old Sega CD were bulky, and I just got rid of it at one point. Regret it a little bit, but it's not like I'm missing anything. I still have my Sega CD, and I'm happy with that. So, but the moral of that story is, I don't get rid of systems, and don't ever get rid of systems, because they're awesome to have, and you'll regret it. I'm feeling a little bit bad that I got rid of that Sega CD. So that's about it. I hope that was interesting for someone out there. And just another shout out to Dan. Thanks for introducing me to this series of questions. Until next time, thanks for watching.